Hello again. If there is one thing above all others which winds up governments, it is people speaking freely and spreading information to each other without let or hindrance. This is, of course, why China tries to limit or restrict its citizens' access to the internet. Let them browse freely on Google and there's no telling what they're going to find out. In Britain, too, governments have always hated the idea of people being well informed. This is why before the English Civil War it was illegal to publish newspapers in England containing domestic news about what was going on in the country. It was felt that this might stir up discontent and trouble. By the beginning of the 18th century, newspapers were appearing across much of Britain, but many were less concerned with distributing news than they were in attacking government policy, and, as those running the country thought, creating mischief. It was no longer possible or politically desirable to suppress such things simply by passing a law and banning them, so the idea was dreamed up of taxing them out of existence. In 1712 the Stamp Act was passed with the specific aim of restricting the flow of information to the public. Newspapers were now taxed at a penny a page. Other publications were also covered by the Act, including political pamphlets. As a consequence of the paper tax and stamp tax, the Times in 1815 cost sixpence, between 2p and 3p in modern currency. 2/3 of this price was to cover the tax payable on each copy of a newspaper at that time. The aim of this tax, which has been described as a tax on knowledge, was no secret. It was to prevent ordinary men and women from being able to afford newspapers. The British government believed that cheap newspapers had inflamed the situation in America, helping to fan the flames of the revolution there. They also felt that the French Revolution had been caused in part by the circulation of dangerous new ideas. The hope was that by preventing these ideas from being printed and distributed to the working classes, the danger of any kind of uprising in Britain could be averted. There was, it was true, popular unrest, but this wasn't always articulated by those dissatisfied with their lot. It was therefore thought necessary to suppress cheap publications, lest they encourage radical and seditious ideologies to flourish. Speaking in 1819 of the Newspaper Stamp Duty Act, Lord Ellenborough explained that it was not against the respectable press that this bill was directed, but against the pauper press. The pauper press. This is what YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok are today. The pauper press, which tells ordinary people about events of which they might otherwise be unaware. In many ways, the tax on newspapers achieved its end. By raising the cost of newspapers to sixpence or sevenpence, they became beyond the reach of most working people. In 1815, an agricultural labourer might expect to earn perhaps 2 shillings a day. This meant that buying a copy of the Times every day would have taken about a quarter of a working man's income. Clearly, this medium, although technically nationwide, was unlikely to reach everybody. It couldn't really be called a mass medium at all at that time. All that has changed now, because everybody can spread news and their opinions instantly across the country, indeed across the whole world. A few years ago, to get your opinion read by many other people, you might have to write a letter to a newspaper, which they could decide to publish or not. Now, of course, it's not just your family, neighbours or workmates who know what you think. Anybody can comment on YouTube. Anybody can start their own YouTube channel. Anyone can publish his or her views on TikTok or Twitter. It is truly democratic and allows a voice to us all. Which is, of course, why the government is so keen to put a stop to this free and easy state of affairs. Those who listened to Keir Starmer reading out a statement on the disorder seen in Liverpool in the last few days, the one where he talked about thugs and his desire to stop people travelling freely about the country and so on, might have missed the most chilling sentence of all. In the description to this video, I give a link to the government website, which contains the text of his statement, and we read the following words. And let me also say to large social media companies and those who run them, violent disorder clearly whipped up online, that is also a crime. It's happening on your premises, and the law must be upheld everywhere. This is, of course, a clearly worded warning to companies such as YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok, telling them that the British government is unhappy with the way in which they are allowing all kinds of dreadful working class people to say what they please, and warning that if they don't start exercising some censorship, then the Home Secretary will be looking at ways of making life difficult for them. This part of Starmer's speech was intended as a warning shot, fired with the intention of putting the frighteners on social media companies in trying to get them to delete videos and comments about what is happening in this country. This is precisely the same attitude as governments I mentioned in the 18th century, the people who blame the American Revolution not on the terrible policies government policies which provoked the colonies to revolt, but rather on the so-called pauper press for inciting revolution. Just as the British government in the 1790s hoped to stop working men reading newspapers by making them so expensive, so too does the present government intend to threaten social media companies with prosecution for breaking the law if they don't start closing down people's accounts and deleting videos. Instead of asking themselves why people are rioting, they feel that the best tactic would be to stop them hearing about the riots, or to make sure that they can only read about them in newspapers which are controlled. In other words, they wish to follow exactly the same path as China, if they can get away with it. The social media are great levelers, giving an equal voice to the rich and powerful and the poor and helpless. They show democracy in action, and it would be a very dangerous thing indeed if the government were allowed to influence what was said via these media, unless, of course, what is said actually does break the law.